Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accelerating Digitalization. We are live today with best-selling author David Galea. My name is Mark Kane. I'm the co-founder of Sustainabil-IT. Our mission is to accelerate sustainability through technology, and a very important part of that is, in order to accelerate sustainability, you need to have the foundations right, which are the foundations of technology. So we're delighted to have David on today, who's the author of Digital Made Simple. And
hello, Mark.
Great to see you,
hello,
David.
Everyone.
I just say for our audience, I just say that I remember we spoke for the first time pre-pandemic, back before we through the pandemic, we started looking at everybody's backgrounds and seeing, who's the person behind the job title and so on. And I remember complimenting you on your, all of the accolades you have there on your wall. So maybe for our audience, if you pardon the pun, can you tell us about your background? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for the introduction, Mark, and it's a pleasure indeed to be with you here today.
Thanks.
I'm basically a digital transformation specialist. I've been doing this work for the past 20 years, mainly in Europe, Middle East, and the United Kingdom, focusing on sectors ranging from public sector, financial services, construction, tourism, hospitality, and various others. And from my experience, unfortunately, I have been engaged after projects have failed dramatically. And you can see that eventually, once you start to pick up the pieces, it becomes really even more challenging to actually bring about a success. Why? Because obviously people are disillusioned with their experience, and the resistance to change is even more greater at that point in time. So from my experience, it is very important to get the principles, which are really simple, right back well into account when you start to implement a digital transformation project. Most digital transformation projects fail. In fact, the rate is around 80%, which is really, really very high.
Yeah.
And there are numerous reasons why digital projects fail. But if I were to sum up the most important factor why such projects fail, I can basically sum it up into one common dimension, which is the people factor. People across the world, it's not just employees, but it could be other stakeholders, it could be the customers themselves who don't want to use the technology, it could be external parties or suppliers who you need their input in order to be in a position to implement the system. So the moral of the story is that people need to be brought on board right from the start. And this is the very essence of my book called Digital Made Simple, which is a very humanistic book. In spite of the fact of addressing a technology component, there is a lot of emphasis on the human being as the central element that needs to be managed to ensure that digitalization is successful. In fact, my book is broadly divided into three main areas, which address aspects of transformation. And these include, the first part is about mindfulness, digital mindfulness, which means being knowledgeable about where you are today on your digital maturity. And we can talk about that later on in the process. And it might not always be the case that the leaders themselves know where they are today. So it is very important to take a stock take of where you are today, using specific techniques, because if you get the baseline wrong, then obviously your strategy moving forward will be wrong. So it is very important to get your foundations right. The second part is about digital leadership and agility. So although it is very important to chart a digital roadmap and have a concrete digital strategy to put in action, you need to be prepared to change it along the way, because things change around you, circumstances are different, outcomes are not as you expect them to be, and the next pandemic or the next catastrophe might arise where the stated assumptions, the status quo will change dramatically and the business rules change. So it is very important to keep your ears on the ground and listen carefully to what the information is telling you about the business, but not just the information, even the people around you. You don't need to basically be behind the door, but you need to knock it down and go down with your people at the shop floor to make sure that you are aware of what is happening around you to make the necessary changes as you go along. The third area, which my book focuses on, is all about balance. It's called balanced leadership. And essentially, we have all mentioned factors, the three typical factors of digitalization, which are the business dimension, the people dimension, the technology aspect. But what most organizations do is they try to get the best of everything. But the best may not be the right thing to do. What you need is to achieve the right type of people, to the right type of processes, to the right type of technology. And there needs to be a balance across all of these elements. Why? Because your digital strategy is as strong as your weakest chain in the link. So it makes sense to achieve a balance to optimize the performance of your organization. So this is in a nutshell, basically, the digital journey that I describe in my book.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David. That's actually a great synopsis of the book. What I took from it, reading it, was, you talked also about your personal journey, and there really is sort of the attention to the people factor in it. I sort of recall as well another book that I really enjoyed reading was Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey Moore, and talking about how the adoption curve of technology was reliant not on the innovators, but really on that early majority or the mainstream of adopters, and making sure that they're on board. That at the other extreme you have what are known in his terms as the laggards, who are very fearful of technology and don't want any change. And it's about knowing where people are and meeting them where they are. And as you say, it's knock down that door, get out there, get talking to people. Another stat that I liked was from the PMI, who talk about project management, and they say 90% of it is communication. And this is the thing is, in environments that you talk about where maybe the trust is not there, it's very much about listening to people, listening to the concerns, and showing them this is what's coming. So you see the success really is built upon your how your relationships are, telling people what's coming, letting them know early, all of these things that you mentioned in the book. So I think that is probably the one, the first strong message to take out from it is it's very much about the people nowadays. With our cloud technologies, with our ability to configure things very quickly, we're not reliant on a lengthy process waiting for a customization. We can do things in a very agile way. And also, because we can sort of do a version 1 of something very quickly, we can put it in front of these users and say, this is where we're going. They can visualize it, so you can show them, sort of the direction it's going, and give them the opportunity to engage early and to help correct the path. So you talk about as well, agility. Maybe you can expand upon that in a moment more, but I recall from a former boss of mine. He talked about the importance of that flexibility to change based on new information. In some arenas, people will sort of set a path, and they refuse to take on board new information because they feel they might lose face having not known about it. The reality is you can only benefit from encompassing or bringing in that new information and adjusting your direction. So maybe you can talk to us about agility, and a word that you also use in your book, which I really liked, was chaos.
Good. You are so right, Mark. Let me start off from the concept of, let me start talking about chaos, because chaos is the very essence of agility. So let's start from the aspect of chaos. Most organizations fear chaos, but in practice, chaos can actually work to the advantage, particularly of small organizations. Why is that the case? Large enterprises typically have established processes, they have benefited from learning curve impacts, and they have very efficient practices which are into play. So they have automation, digitalization, which is quite advanced in those areas. So if everything remains the same, they are at an advantage in contrast to a small organization which is new to the market and still has to learn the ropes. However, when chaos happens, and I want to qualify and define what chaos is not a random event happening. Chaos is something which changes the rules of the game and creates new patterns of working. So there is a pattern and there is a trend and there could be a prediction. But its secret is to unlock the actual code, the new code, which has been created as a result of chaos. So this is a very important point. Once chaos occurs and the status quo no longer applies, large organizations, their business processes may be efficient, but they will be likely to be ineffective in addressing the customer pain points or in addressing the new circumstances that are on board. So they need to change. So essentially, change disrupts their status quo and their routines, and therefore they still need to go back to the learning curve to learn new things, which means that they are in the same boat of smaller counterparts. And actually, smaller organizations can actually be at an advantage over the larger counterparts. Why? Because smaller organizations can be more agile, they can be fast and flexible to fit the requirements of the new market conditions and the new rules of the game. And they can create the right innovative capability and use heuristic knowledge to actually uncover the new code of the new game. Because if they succeed in identifying the new patterns, they will be at an advantage over their competition. So this is a very intrinsic and important thing that they need to consider. Now, obviously, to exploit chaos, you need to basically have your ears to the ground. You have to constantly listening to what the environment is telling you. But the problem of today is not that we don't have information. We have too much information. But that information, in most cases, is noise. And if it is noise, you don't really need it. So as a human being, we are limited by our capacity to absorb knowledge and information. So we really need to be very selective to what we listen. And listen attentively to what those factors are telling you and monitoring them on an ongoing basis. Which brings me to the topic that I address also in my book, which is about the vital signs. What are the vital signs? Essentially, the vital signs are those factors of the business which, if they fail, they will doom your business. So those factors have to be monitored and, if possible, on an ongoing basis and on a real-time basis. And today we have the technology to monitor changes in performance of certain aspects in real time, thanks to IoT, actuators, sensors. We've got a lot of automation software, the process, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of tools today that we can use to listen carefully what the vital signs are saying. The second category of information that we need to look into are what I call preventive checks. So on a regular basis, we need to review specific aspects of the organization and make sure that those are in line. So examples of vital signs would be the usual suspects like financial information, like return on investment, profitability, margins, contributions, but also customer satisfaction and employee morale. So typically you can create a simple dashboard, normally not more than 6 to 8 indicators, which ideally lie on the CEO's and CIO's laptop, and he can actually see movement in real time of what is happening in the organization. And if something goes wrong, basically, he can drill down even further. So once you've got the vital signs and the preventive checks in place, anything that goes wrong, you can probe even further by carrying out an analysis of why those factors have failed. So that is from an information point of view. But information is not enough in itself. You need to have the right flexible structures in place to make sure that people are actually knowledgeable about how that action is going to be implemented. Because you can know that something needs to be done, but you need to have the right structures for that action to be exercised. So whenever you're implementing a digital roadmap and digital strategy, you need to delegate the functions to the lower levels. And the last part, which is, I think, is the most important, is all about motivation and commitment. And there's a big difference between the two. I don't have enough time to describe the difference, but in a nutshell, basically, motivation is derived through power, through changes in power, and commitment is derived through the strength of trust relationships created in organizations. And commitment is something which is much better than motivation, because motivation is temporary, but commitment is permanent. So your focus should be in achieving commitment from people to make the change happen. So that is basically how agility can be achieved. So to sum up, good knowledge and information, which is focused on the vital signs. The second aspect is having a very low hierarchical structure where you can communicate the decisions of the digital strategy across a very few structures and systems. And the third part, which is about motivating the people and making sure you have their commitment to implement change.
Yeah. There's a lot in there. I really like that. Just to pull out one snippet, I think that's a great soundbite. Is motivation and temporary commitment is permanent, and this thing in terms of measuring sort of employee engagement, that's definitely one of your KPIs. It also, coming back to where you described chaos, probably it's a great word to get people's attention, because chaos and technology is sort of, you think about it like oil and water. These things should not mix. But I'm reminded of two things. One said by a real person and one by a fictional person. The fictional person was in Game of Thrones. Peter Baelish said, "Chaos is a ladder," so it is an opportunity to accelerate where you want to go. And the other one was again a former boss who had seen from his experience that people in technology tend to struggle with what he called ambiguity. And he said the best technologists that he's dealt with are the ones that are able to embrace that ambiguity, because entrepreneurs are all about ambiguity, because they may have an idea, but there's it's not a clear path. There's hurdles. There's certain different directions, but they navigate them as they go, and they deal with it as they go. And that entrepreneurial mindset, if you find technologists like yourself who are able to embrace that ambiguity, that's what really helps to get a company to that level of transformation. So those were two observations that I had there, but certainly that thing in terms of commitment, in terms of KPIs, and I really like the concept of, you want to have the early warning systems in terms of these preventive preventive KPIs before something has happened, before the sort of the horse has bolted. And it's interesting, in our conversations with chief sustainability officers, they describe as one of the biggest challenges getting the real-time data, because a lot of the times in the past, without sort of formal systems, they're doing a lot of Excel-based work, and they may be doing some heavy lifting towards the end of the year for the annual report, and they only get a full picture of what has happened throughout the year too late, whereas they should be getting it at all times and see how are we doing percentage-wise against targets. So that's very much where we see technology can help. But going from the converse of that, where you talk about agility and the need to be able to adapt, conversely, does that sort of negate the need for a long-term digital strategy, or do they go hand in hand?
It's an interesting question. Long-term is equally important. You need to have a vision of where you want to go, because there's a difference between having a vision and having a strategy. A vision is timeless. So no matter what happens, your vision is always the same, because a vision targets a need, and a need doesn't change. It's the means of addressing that need which changes over time. So basically, having a long-term approach helps you make sure that you know what you want to achieve over a period of time. However, obviously, your digital strategy, the way in which it is rolled out, can have its twists along the way, which needs to be adapted. So although you need to have a clear long-term direction of where you want to go, so for a case in point, tangibly, so what is the source of competitive advantage of the company? So it is about providing excellent customer service. So a critical element of your digital strategy was developing an unrivaled user experience, customer experience in the process. So that will still stand, but in terms of customer experience, that can change over time. So you have a number of projects which you launch, and ideally projects should not be very long to make sure that you benefit, get the most benefit out of them, and be continuously with your ears on the ground to make sure that you can adapt the changes in the circumstances. In fact, today, I typically recommend to move away from highly integrated systems to actually go to modular systems, because it is cheaper to make changes in modular systems as opposed to integrated, where obviously when you have a change in your environment, you have to look at all the change, at all the systems. Whereas in a modular system, as you know, it is much easier and less complex to make the right changes.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so you're saying interoperable versus integrated is going to be more agile, and we see that, for example, with Microsoft 365 is a good example of it. You're able to make use of things like Power Automate in particular to connect up different systems. And the established sort of integrated ERP systems. They do their job very well, but as you say, if you're making a change there's so many knock-on areas that you need to test. So yeah, there's that balance to be had, which comes on to, as you say, in terms of the balance in the organization. The other thing that I thought was interesting, where you talk about, as well as on the roadmap, you talk about digital maturity and knowing where you are and knowing where you want to get to. So maybe you can talk about that, and then I would like to sort of just share with our viewers then, the Digitopia platform, which has got the Digital Maturity Index, and this is all about, as technologists, ourselves using a technology to help accelerate this is something that is unusual, because many technology companies seem to be like the cobbler's children with holes in their shoes. This is taking it the other way. It's actually saying let's lead with technology. But tell us a bit about your thoughts on achieving digital maturity, and with organizations knowing where they are, where they need to get to.
Yes, this is also another interesting point, Mark. When you look at digital maturity, it is fundamental. Why? Because organizations cannot start running until they know how to walk first. So otherwise they will trip. So it is of utmost importance to understand what level of maturity you have achieved so that you can move to the next level. So to do that, you need to carry out an assessment of your organization. And when I talk to CEOs, sometimes they tell me, but I already know where I am. But when you start talking to their people down the shop floor, they have completely different views of the status quo in contrast to what the senior management has to say. And experience also shows me that the larger the organization, the greater the dichotomy that exists between the senior management team and also the people who are actually executing the digital strategy or actually working with the systems of the organization. So, as a humanistic approach, I firmly believe that no matter what type of digital maturity framework you use, and there are different ones and that it can be used, you need to involve everyone in the process, because all people have their different perspectives, they have their different position, and they can give the best feedback of where your organization is today. And in that way, by recalibrating reality, by getting different myopic views together, you have a better chance of getting a fair representation of where your organization really is today. And by having a sound baseline, you can create a more appropriate growth trajectory from a digitalization objective.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So maybe we just bring up our screen now. I think I'd like to just draw people to your website so they can make a note of it. Um, the book I've seen on Amazon as well. You have all 5-star reviews, which
Thank you.
is quite a feat to get on Amazon. So it's getting rave reviews. It's it's been a great read. I really like the personal story that you brought into it. Um, and we have something that we want to announce just at the end as well. I'll wait a couple of minutes for that. But just where we're talking digital maturity, I just want to draw our viewers in to give them an overview here very briefly of what we're using for digital maturity evaluations. And also in our organization, we're using it for sustainability maturity is the Digitopia platform. Now, the ability to accelerate sustainability relies on technology. So what Digitopia have is they have the Digital Maturity Index and their Sustainability Maturity Index. And the starting point of that is, as you say, getting consensus among all of the relevant parties in the organization in terms of where are we at and where do we want to get to. And they break it down. We've talked about people, process, and technology. We break it down further into a subcategory of dimensions here as well. So because we're talking about our operations and our people, how it's working. We talk about the governance behind the behind the operations, and we don't just talk about our people internally, but also our customers. Because they're essentially they're the ones who pay the bills. But what I really like about the Digitopia platform, first of all, is there are maturity levels from 1 to 5 across a number of different sort of subcategories and topics in these areas. And when it comes to technology, it's usually fairly sort of binary in that regard. We know where we are in terms of our cloud strategy. Are we fully in the cloud? Are we sort of doing it on a case by case basis? How are we in terms of our security profile? In terms of what are we using? And the great thing about this is that it essentially will measure across all of the dimensions. We've sort of we've done the Blue Peter. Here's one I prepared earlier. But what that delivers for us is shows us where we're at, shows us in terms of how we're looking against the average, how we're looking against the best. So we're able to benchmark in terms of where we're at, both in terms of current state, the gap between our current and our target. And here's the really exciting part is then with the combination of the platform itself and our sort of expertise in terms of experience to highlight the priority initiatives that companies need to be implementing, the urgency and the size of the task. So we have this for digital maturity. The great thing about this is that this is not just a strategy report that ends up in a drawer somewhere. This is a living strategy. So this is something that the CIO, the CTO can be sort of meeting with sort of the C-suite on a periodical basis, whether they deliver it in downloaded to PDF form or live, they can do so and saying here are our initiatives, and we connect this then out to Jira so that we can or through Power Automate we can bring it into Microsoft in order that we can say here's the progress against these agreed initiatives, and do we have changes along the way? Do we need to recalibrate? So this is something that we're very we're finding extremely useful in our interactions. So coming back to your book, I think we're just, because we're going to be running out of time shortly, I think it'd be an important point to state is that you and I have talked for a long time, and we've
Yes.
really found a meeting of minds in terms of the ability of technology
Very true.
to really help organizations with a competitive advantage, but also in terms of accelerating their sustainability goals. And so it's great that we can maybe announce it here that we are co-authoring the follow-up book to Digital
Yes.
Made Simple. It's a great honor for me to co-author with a
Similar.
best-selling author. So our working title is Digital-Led Sustainability, which will be published next year. And we're very excited to announce that. So, David, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's a
Thank you, Mark.
fantastic book. The link is up there for everybody. Anybody who's interested in learning about the Digitopia platform, please contact us at Sustainabil-IT. We are the Ireland, UK, Nordics, and Romania partner that are selling the Digitopia platform. And here's our website and contact details. So until the next time, thanks very much, everybody, and that's a wrap.
Thank you.